No. Later on. Later on. Okay. So good evening, everyone. Good evening. Okay. So thank you so much, Anne, for the introduction. To say again, like this morning, it's really a pleasure to be with you. I'm a bit scared of this thing of keynote. I thought it was just a few people, but there are a lot of people. And that's very important because with a lot of people, we are really strong. We are the people, and I hope you will make a lot of good things out of this convergence meeting. I have the feeling it's a really important meeting for many of you that I talked with. And, well, Anne invited us to come here and share a little bit with you what is happening outside the US, and more specifically what's happening with forest in the global south, the tropical forest. And it is a sort of global picture that Anne asked me to give about the conflict between the communities there and those who are promoting deforestation. And I would like to start just to say that, well, we often talk about deforestation, about the conflicts, about, bad things that are happening. But I think it was Orin this morning that reminded us again that it's important to learn about history. And when we talk about history and we think about the forest, and we think about tropical forest, and I think it's not very different from here. It's actually a very beautiful story. It's actually a story of people who still had their liberty, about people who were extremely connected among each other. This happened both in the Amazon region, in the Congo Basin in Africa, in the Mekong in Indonesia, Malaysia, and those countries. It was one big forest where people were connected, and we still don't know exactly how many connections happened at that time. But it could happen because there was liberty. Nowadays we have our national states, and they have their border control. And people like in Central Africa, to go to their neighbors, they need to ask for a visa. They cannot just go like in the past. And it's not to think of it like a sort of nostalgia, how good it was, but it's to think about, to remind it what is important and what it tells to us of what is important for forest struggles. So forest struggles, they are social struggles. Our struggle as World Rainforest Movement is to defend forest, and it's actually to defend people. And to repeat it again, where we still have tropical forests worldwide, it's because there are people who defend their forest, who don't want to give up their forest, because in the forest there is everything what they need, and they can have their well-being. So that's very important. Also, if we think about what you put in the paper for this convergence meeting, it's about radical transformation. So radical transformation connecting to deforestation, we should think in the first place, what are the root causes of deforestation? What is really the underlying causes of deforestation? And to explain to you what we have learned about that, I want to tell you two little stories. I want to take you to the Amazon. I'm really happy that we are here, actually, and not outside, because the temperature here is coming a little bit closer to what we can experience in the Amazon, and I'm really comfortable with that. So I will take you first to the Amazon, and I will take you to the Xingu River. It's a very big, beautiful river in the Amazon, and I will take you to a moment several years ago that this guy from this energy company came there, a big Brazilian energy company, and he stood on this stone close to the river, And he said to the people, they were in this delegation together with the local communities, and he was just standing there and talking, and he said, wow, there is nothing here. There is really nothing here. That's the first story. The second story is from the region where I come from. Maybe you think, what, this guy has a strange English Brazilian accent, but actually I was born in the Netherlands and later on came to Brazil, and I consider it as my country. I'm connected with the people there and I've rooted there, but just to, because I think some people are curious, but so I'm talking about my region. It's the Atlantic forest on the coast in the southeast of Brazil. And 50, 60 years ago, a group of Guarani indigenous people, they were walking along the coast, and this is part of their way of living, their livelihoods, their tradition. From time to time, they leave their village, they need to go on a walk, and they go to walk to look for the land where they can realize their mode of living. They are looking for, they call it the land without evil, the terra sem males, we say in Portuguese. And one night they arrived at this river, the Piraqueaçu, also a beautiful river. And they came at the river and they looked at the other side, and there was this beautiful forest there, and they slept. And at night, Dona Maria, who was the spiritual leader of this group, she had a dream. She had a revelation, and it's in the dreams that the Guarani, they receive the message from Nyanderu, which is God for them. And the message was, Dona Maria, you need to make a village here, because this is the place where the Guarani can build their prayers house. It's a place with forest, it's a place with water, it's a place with a lot of hunting and fishing. So the next day they went over the river and they started to make the village. Now, let's go back to the Amazon. What happened in the Amazon? In the Amazon, nowadays when you come at this place, you can see the second biggest hydro dam in the world, the Belo Monte Dam. When you come in this area of Dona Maria, you can see one of the biggest tree plantations, eucalyptus plantations of Brazil. And this is all about profit making. And tell you one more story about this second story from Dona Maria. Later on, when the indigenous people in that region started to claim their land back from the plantation company, and because they have a right to the land, there is this process, administrative process, that they, at some point, the company, they can challenge the claim of the indigenous people. And I want to remind one sentence in that challenge was like this, with all their supposed legal title deeds and everything, and all their, all the profits that they make, all the financial this and that. And there was this sentence, how can an indigenous woman put at risk a $3 billion investment? So let's come, what I learned from this, what we have learned from this, talking about root causes, this is about capitalism. This is about profit making. The root cause, of course, of deforestation is capitalist expansion. It's also the corporate capture of the states that are collaborating, making such a hydro dam, making such a big plantation, just destroying the forest, and just expelling the people. The Belo Monte Dam, I think about at least 10 indigenous people, they are heavily affected by the dam. But it's not only that, what we can learn from these two small stories. It's also about, this man, he stands on this stone, he said, there is nothing here. What happened to this man? Is he blind? Yes, he is. And he is consciously blind because a long time ago, even before capitalism really came to its destructive way of expansion. We in our Western culture, we broke this relation with nature. We separated humans from nature. It's also an important wood cause of deforestation. And it enabled us to say, okay, we can dominate nature. It's not anymore something that we belong to. And we can just destroy it, and we can sleep again. They also see, like, forest, if they see something in forest, they see the trees, they see the timber. Actually, we had a discussion today about forest definition. You know what is the international accepted forest definition? I mean, I don't accept it, you won't accept it, but our governments, they accept it. It's basically a forest is any area with a bunch of trees. They only talk in the forest definition about the trees. They don't talk about the other living beings. They don't talk about the people. And it's actually to benefit the corporation that make profit from the timber. It's another root cause of deforestation nowadays, because monoculture tree plantations, this is a forest. They just say, oh yeah, it's a planted forest, but it's still a forest. And we can see more root causes in these two small stories. Indigenous women putting at risk $3 billion investment. Patriarchy, racism, colonialism, imperialism. It's all there. And it's not only, there are thousands and thousands of stories. And probably you can see more root causes. So when we want to transform this, all of this needs to be transformed. We need to get rid of all of this. And a long time for the forest-dependent communities in the Global South, there were like two big threats. There was the destruction of the companies for the mining, the plantations, the infrastructure, the agro-business. And there was another threat, and that were the big conservation NGOs, creating the national parks. Because even keeping the forest standing, the people were expelled, the people were removed. And we have raised problems about that. We have exposed the companies. We even went to international conferences on forest to discuss how to stop deforestation. What did we get back from this? Solutions? No. We got back more deforestation, more conservation, more problems for forest-dependent communities. And what they call solutions, it are false solutions because they are in the benefit of the companies. And they still cause forest destruction. And they've gone very far in this, you know. So talking about the two big problems for the communities, the destruction, nowadays any company is green, right? Any company, you go to their website, they have their sustainability reports, right? A tree plantation like this, they are all certified nowadays. But they continue large scale, they continue monoculture, they continue destroying. The logging in the forest, most of the logging in the Amazon forest, they don't call it logging, they call it sustainable forest management. They do the so-called selective logging. They do it even with communities, and it's still very destructive. The coal mining has become clean. They call it clean coal. The big dams, they have become green with renewable energy. The corporations, they got a big helping hand with all of this. And we need to mention them, the big conservation NGOs. And we should decide something among ourselves, I think. We should stop calling them NGOs. They are business. They are partners in business. And the conflicts with communities have increased. And what is scary nowadays, what we are so concerned about, it, the scale of things are increasing, the time is decreasing, you know? So the machines that do the coal mining, they are different from 20 years ago. The machines that cut these trees, they are very different from 20 years ago. They are more efficient. They do things more quickly. They enable more destruction. So, nowadays, they think, well, we are destroying so many forests, let's conserve the forest. It's a huge contradiction, but they are claiming to do it. And they have even joined together, well, how can we conserve forests? You know, the big corporations, the oil companies, all of them. How can we solve this problem of deforestation? And they said, yeah, the problem is there's no price for it, you know. Of course, they see the timber, but outside the timber, there, you know, what can you do with a forest? But if it gets a price, if we can, you know, if we can make something out of this, who knows? And they've done this seriously with big reports, with big studies. And there's one particular thing that has come out of this that we are talking a lot about these days. And it is considered like the new, you know, the new gold. It's maybe becoming the new forest definition. Actually, I mean, I was talking about Gabon this morning, you know, about this zero deforestation company working in a very forested country. They are talking about changing the forest definition, you know, to what? They're not talking anymore about trees. They talk about a forest definition according to the quantity of forest of carbon that you can find in an area. So it is about a bunch of carbon now that will be what we will call forest. And the way they are doing it is that they only consider forest where there is quite a lot of carbon. So the secondary forest, which is quite a lot after the logging, you can call it secondary forest, you can still deforest. But, I mean, this is really bizarre, you know. Gabon is the first country that we know about that is really, you know, working on it, and they will soon have a forest definition which is talking about carbon. And it's actually very funny that over the past 20 years, the forests have gone out of the international agenda, you know. They have gone out. There was a lot of talk in the 80s, in the 1990s, but after that, they were out. But they have come back again. And, well, if you look in the UN Forest Conference, you cannot find anything, but you will find a lot in the UN Climate Conference. They've been talking much more about forest than about anything else. And this corporate captured UN climate conferences, because they have, now they are considered, they can be there, actually. They can sit around the table. They have defined the climate problem as follows. Climate problem is just a problem of too much carbon in the atmosphere, too much carbon in the air. So the solution is how to get it out as soon as we can. And we have this Paris Agreement. Three bad things about this Paris Agreement. First of all, many have celebrated, many governments. It is voluntary. So still if a lot of, I mean, any country can decide if they do something about the carbon, the climate crisis or not. Second thing, they talk about forest in the Paris Agreement, but there is no word of, there's no mention to oil, no mention to coal, there's no mention to gas that is contributing with 90% of the problem of climate crisis, right? Climate change, global warming. And the third thing that is very, very bad in this agreement, that they actually accept this idea of compensation. They accept that if you say we are going to protect a forest because it is threatened to be deforested, we can still dig up a bit more oil and burn it and put this carbon in the air. It is true, it's the same carbon, but for the climate it's not. We are still putting more carbon in the atmosphere. But we have already 10, 12 years, we have this WET, you know, this reduction of emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And what have they been doing? I mean, the World Bank has been working on this. All these big international conservation NGOs, they have been working on this. What has been the results? There have been 300 projects. What is our analysis of this? Well, all the areas where there are the big deforestation going on, like in Brazil, where the fires were now, you cannot find really wet projects there. You will find a wet project in the isolated areas of forest areas. And you will find it where there are communities, because where there's forest, there are communities. And you will find these communities angry, because they cannot access anymore their forest. And actually, they are once again, through all this policy, blamed for the deforestation that's happening. And they are asking, why are you not going to stop deforestation? Why are you coming here? The Belamonte Dam was about, now I have to calculate, 120,000 acres of forest has gone. The Aracruz, the eucalyptus plantation where the Guarani people were arriving and was put afterwards, it has deforested in that area at least about 1.5 million acres of forest. Why are you not stopping that? They were talking about creating a market, these oil companies. They said, no, we're going to create a market in carbon. It will be wonderful. We can make business in market, and any market they see as an opportunity to make profit. The carbon market has become a failure. It just doesn't work. It's still much more profitable for the companies to set up an oil palm plantation than doing a wet project because of this, to selling some tons of carbon. And now they have this wet plus, so they included sustainable forest management. So now you can do a sustainable forest management. Remember I talked about this destruction with the selective logging. It can also be included in wet, so there is more destruction going on. And you can include with wet plus reforestation. Reforestation, tree plantations. Now, the World Bank, the World Bank is a very important actor, and they have their forest department and forest policies, and they have this motto of learning by doing. Yeah? The World Bank says we are learning by doing. They are doing without learning, and they continue doing this because, under the Paris Agreement, because they defined the problem just forgetting about the oil and the coal and everything, but focusing on we need to get this carbon out of the air. And they are talking about 100, biotechnology solutions, but the only one that really works is with trees, because actually trees store carbon. Nobody will deny that. But our climate problem is huge. So what we see now is something we didn't see before, and is really a challenge for all the forest and peasant communities also. I mean, actually all the rural communities in the global south, especially in the global south, because the trees, they grow much faster there than here. So we have this bond challenge, which is promoted by the World Bank and the German government. And they are talking about 1 million acres of reforestation. They don't talk about tree plantations. They talk about forest restoration, reforestation. So my colleague went to this debate in Germany with the German government. It is beautiful bond challenge with the pictures of the forest and forest restoration. Some of these small projects, communities are doing it all the time, forest restoration. So stand up, and I have a question. Are you also going to do tree monocultures, industrial tree monocultures in your forest restoration plan? I said, no, that's not the idea, but yeah, we could accept it because, we could accept some of these plantations. Now a study has been done about the commitments of countries, especially in the global south, and their forest restoration plans. And it's about, let me calculate again in acre, it's more than 1 million acres. It's more than 1 million acres. And according to and the study was interesting because they went into these plans to see how the governments are formulating it. And at least 50% is industrial tree monoculture plantations. So in my country, Brazil, it is 88% of their commitment is tree plantations. It's crazy. There are many other plans. WWF has a plan of 1 trillion trees. It's crazy. It's completely crazy. It's still good for if we, there's one study that says if we plant like about 2 million acres, that's about the size, I think, of Brazil or Australia or something like that, or India. If we plant that, we can solve the problem 37%. Okay, if you leave the forest standing, because they eventually will cut it and it's gone. I think one more other challenge, and I think it's important to tell because it has to do with it, separation of human with nature, that people accept these kind of things. It's called biodiversity compensation. And don't know if it's happening here, but I want to share it with you. And we went to Madagascar, Madagascar, east of Africa, African continent. And there is this mining company, Rio Tinto, and they are going to do a big mining project there. And they have this beautiful biodiversity compensation project. So how does that work? So they have a lot of these biologists. I should remember there's this science of, forest engineering, forest tree, it's not forest tree. I mean the wall of science. Yeah. Let's keep, the committed scientists with us, but let's expose the bad science. There's a group of like hundreds of biologists, and what have they done? They have gone to this mining site of Rio Tinto, this beautiful forest on Madagascar, and they have made an inventory of all the plants there, of all the biodiversity. And when they got that, it's a study like this, they went all around in Madagascar, where can we find a comparable area? Where we find more or less the same trees, the same fauna, this and that. And they found it. And again, there are communities there. So what did they do? They did their mining project, and they came to the communities, and they calculated to compensate, And they said to the community, you cannot use this forest anymore, but we can give you work. We will let you plant trees. So they had to go to an area to plant trees, but they did their agriculture in the forest. So the people said, how are we going to eat? Said, oh yeah, we have another area where you can plant your manioc. And they went there, and the manioc got really bad because in the forest it's going good, and there it was going bad. So they got in trouble. So we went there to understand what was going on. And you know what? Rio Tinto, they're actually saying we are increasing biodiversity because, this mine has to come because of development, development, another root cause of deforestation. We have to do this because there's a demand, for this typical mineral. And so we have to do that. But we compensate because this community eventually, because their population will increase, So this forest they are using, they will, it will be destroyed by the community. Once again, they blame a community that always cared for their forest for deforestation. So we have compensated that, but then the community is going to work on planting trees, so we will increase biodiversity. Yeah, that's a lot of, imagination. What the point that I want to make is that why are we opposing this? Why are we supporting the community to oppose this? Why are we supporting community to tell this story into a report that went out and made Rio Tinto get crazy about all this visibility to the craziness of their project, that they eventually stopped the project? But they say that we can compare one place to another. It's just, if you have the same plants, it's the same place. No. This community is living in this forest. They are not living in the forest in the mining area. It's in that forest that they have their woods. It's that forest that they have their sacred places. Every place is unique. And they are just, trying to, now we have the same in the Amazon. In the Amazon, you know, big destructive companies, they are appropriating land to compensate already for their future mines, their future, and the people are getting in between without any space. So I want to finalize, because it's taking already a long time. I want to talk about resistance. And I want to tell you that there's so much resistance going on, but we don't know about it. And people are isolated everywhere. And we have our governments defending the national interest for the companies. I want just to put a few things that came to my mind thinking about our experience of facilitating that struggles can happen, that people can, you know, build a movement, and what makes this movement, this resistance, strong. I think wherever these movements, this resistance is strong, where communities have the chance to reconnect with each other, where they, you know, they can do a process of alliance building. They had these alliances in the past, they were just broken, and where they can take time for that, where they can make the rules, you know, maybe not having keynote speakers and things like that. There is a very interesting process in Brazil going on among communities. They come together, and the first thing they did, they made the rules, you know. They made the rules on how they do their meeting. You know, it's very different on how we organize, although I'm excited about the way you have organized this convergence meeting. It's all about taking time. You took 2 years to organize this, right? So you need to take time. You need to do the things with care. It's not a fast process. If you want to solve a direct, you know, a small cause of deforestation, it might be fast, but if we talk about transformation, it takes a long time. What makes resistance strong? Where people can learn, you know, where they can exchange among each other about how did this company get your land? What were the tactics that they used there? They have loads of experience. And I mean, many communities, like I said in the morning, they are resisting there, but they are silent. They call it silent resistance. They're just silent because there's not so much to say. Nobody, you know, nobody will listen to them. But these exchanges is like fundamental to, we talked about colonization, decolonize our minds. Our friends in Africa, they talk a lot about decolonization. I mean, we got independence in our countries, but we were not decolonized. We have new elites that are still colonizing our territories. This kind of process where, for example, community activists from experienced communities go to other communities to share their experience, it's so hugely strong, it's so powerful. It can transform, like, people living in isolation, feeling connected, feeling part of a bigger struggle. It makes division coming to a process of unity. It makes people, you know, worried about the compensation, about the health post that the company built, but it doesn't function because they didn't think about anything else than building the post, taking the picture and putting their sustainability reports. Coming to a process where they say, we want our land back. We don't want anything else. Yeah, but well, let's do 2 health posts then. Let's do a hospital in your community. No, we want our land back. What makes resistance strong? Where there is space created for women. Where there's space created for the youth, because some communities, the elderly don't want to listen to the youth. And many communities, the men come together. They might talk with the women in the house and, I don't know, somewhere else. But when it comes to decision, it are the women. When in some processes we have been following, when the space is created for women, so many things come up about company tactics, so many things come up about invisible things, harassment, sexual violence. And when that comes into the bigger community meeting and discussions, and when the women become active participants of the resistance, the struggle gets so tremendously powerful. And when people get united, I mean, there's one thing that these big corporations, they think they are powerful, but they really are afraid of these kind of things. They really are like this, what can we do? And there is a lot of repression going on, criminalization and everything. Exactly, because, I mean, that's where the resistance is taking place and is getting formed. I think one important thing is, I mean, there are so many communities that lost the lands, and it has been a long time ago, and we are too often concerned about, you know, the communities that are still in struggle, and when they lose, we go to the next community that are still in struggle. So on the one hand, it's important, you know, to reach out to other communities that are still not having these corporations coming with their promises and their deceits and their lies and everything. Prevent the damage is very important, but it's also important to not exclude, you know, the conversation with other communities where the situation seems like hopeless. There's one struggle going on in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, that I like to mention. This is the oldest, one of the, I think it's more or less the oldest colonial oil palm plantation, industrial oil palm plantation in Africa, a monoculture tree plantation. And it was set up by the Lever brothers. And maybe you are familiar with one of the biggest multinational companies, Unilever. Well, it was set up by these brothers. They were doing plantations in Nigeria, but the colonial government in Nigeria found they were so violent. We don't want you, imagine, under colonial rule. And, you know, in DRC were the Belgians. And they said, no, you can come in. You can do it all here. So it was a really violent plantation. It was slavery. It was killing. And it was 100 years ago. And now, these communities are struggling to get their lands back. It's a 100 years struggle. So you can root up the trees, you know, you can take out the timber, you can make your money, you can burn it, and actually many companies, plantation companies, they burn the plantation and they bury it somewhere. Many communities tell this story. We saw them burying. Do you have a picture? No. People don't have often, you know, cell phones like many of us have in communities. They cannot take a picture, but you cannot uproot easily the roots of these communities in their territory, in their homeland of their ancestors. It's not an easy process, so it's never too late. Don't forget about that. And I just wanted to show a few slides now. Just, you know, it's not an order, it's not a really coordinated story or something, but just some images of resistance and what we have been seeing and I would like to share. So first, yeah, in the morning I promised to show what is a plantation looks like in the global south. So this is different than the mess you see here around. Did you see the mess? Did you see the mess? Isn't it a mess, you know? Look at this. A pine plantation in South Africa for timber and for paper. It's a bit dark, but this is a rubber plantation somewhere in Southeast Asia. And that's where, you know, you get the tires from the cars. This is a eucalyptus plantation in Brazil. This is all actually for sanitary paper. You know, in industrialized countries. You know, you see this tree? This is actually a biodiversity project of this plantation company. You see? You understand what I mean?
One tree?
Yeah, because this was like cerrado, savanna vegetation, and you have trees in that countryside, and you have 7 types of cerrado, savanna in Brazil, but one type is like a sort of grassland with trees. So they decided to leave the trees. They decided to leave the trees, and they call it a biodiversity conservation project. Yeah. Oil palm in Gabon, young oil palm plantation. And it's because this takes longer time, the oil palm, this is like a major plantation. This is somewhere in Indonesia. So you could see, like, this is a picture to show, you know, the difference between forest plantations. So you see the mess on the left side. You know, all these trees together. You see people inside. You see life inside, you know. This we call in Brazil a green desert. We actually created like this green desert movement. There's no life. One of the indigenous people I worked with struggling against plantation, we talked about how can we define this, and I think he gave like one of the best definition. It's a tree plantation like this is a dead forest that kills everything, and that's it. So Dona Maria, spiritual leader of the Guarani woman, she started this struggle to get the land back, and it's one of the strongest struggles I think I've seen, and I had the pleasure, the privilege to be with them for 15 years. And I mean, this is what needs to be done. They just, you know, took out the eucalyptus and took over the land again. That needs to be done in many places, but it's not easy. But you know, it's not easy to get at that point. This is the MST. You probably know about it, the Landless People Movement in Brazil. They have done a lot of occupations inside plantation areas. They don't have any right at the land, but they just say our constitution says that the land has to fulfill its social function. The land is of the people. It cannot belong to one single company. And they are right. And yeah, we have, it's very important in the struggle to have this sort of motto, you know, these sentences that we repeat and we repeat. We say plantations are not forest. And we repeat in the meetings that sometimes we go, you know, with the state and the corporations, and plantations are not forests. We put our banners. And one other thing that one peasant in one of these meetings we had with the communities in Brazil, he said, yeah, but actually nobody can eat eucalyptus. You know, you can make, you know, the barbecue, you can put it on the barbecue, maybe you can burn it, but it's still not tasty. So what do people do? I mean, they lose, it's always on the fertile lands, the flatlands. This is, you saw the other picture of the MST, they were like entering into the area, and this was the day after. Actually, yeah, not the day after, sorry, but the day after they start planting. And here they are, you know, they have their maize, and this was a plantation like 3 months before. So they start directly to produce food because we need, you know, we need to take care of our food. In Brazil, they created one day, and it might be also important, you know, we were at this sort of convergence meeting with communities, and they said, well, you know, let's have one day together. One day that we are all in different places, but we can do something together. And it's our, you know, it's our little secret together that we do it, and then we can make visibility. But we also want to celebrate a bit our resistance to all of this. Not in a celebrating way like we are happy with it, but in the resistance struggles, many good things happen. But we want to show, you know, that there is resistance, and we all do something, and we call it the International Day of Struggle Against Tree Monocultures. And it started in Brazil, and it came from a community meeting. And this is a poster that an Argentine artist made. I think she made it really nice. The struggle of the people and the forest, and the celebration, the victory. And we have had many victories. 21st of September, and it was chosen because in Brazil it's the day of the tree. And it's more or less the only day in the year that these forest engineers and the plantation company directors, they do this kind of ceremony to plant a native tree on the day of the tree. So we wanted to do it on that day. So now, yeah, we jump from one thing to another, I'm sorry, but I was talking about this carbon projects, this crazy thing of compensation, carbon with the pollution of the oil and everything. And in Acre, this is in Acre, Brazil, where there's also a very interesting alliance building between indigenous people, non-indigenous people, against all these restrictions that are slowly being imposed on them on using their forest, because there's carbon inside. It needs to keep intact. So this was after a meeting that the indigenous people, they went on the street in a small Amazon town, Fora Red. So red, go away. We don't want you here in our territory. Now we jump again to Africa in one very big oil palm plantation area in Cameroon. Community-based organizations. All of their land has been taken for oil palm plantation. Most of them are plantation workers, but still they want their land back. And they are increasingly organizing. And I heard saying yesterday, the wise indigenous leader, that the marches, our politicians just don't listen. It's true. But still in Africa, in the African context, you cannot do easily demonstration in Cameroon. It's a scandal. The police doesn't come to throw water on you, they come to shoot you. So these are people, they are still not taking out the oil palm from their land, but they are going on their streets in their area. This is from Gabon, the slow process also of communities coming together to break the silence, to start speaking out. So just one of these banners, the plantations of oil palm, they will never substitute our forest, our savanna areas. Many women coming together, women participating. Sierra Leone, there's a huge 2,000 people community-based organization struggling against this sockfin company, and the really violent repression, and really strong movement, and they are sick of compensation. They say very clearly, we want our lands back. And on the right side, you see the International Day of Struggle Against Tree Monoculture. It's now celebrated in Africa. They have taken it over. They find it useful. This is in Nigeria, people protesting against Michelin, Michelin, the tire company, the rubber plantations. We jump to India, incredible forest struggles going on in India, also very difficult situation now that the legal instrument that exists there after years of struggle of the people, because don't forget what we have as laws in Brazil or in India or wherever, it's not because our elites that are still governing us wanted to have that law, it was because people struggled to have it, to get it. The Forest Right Act in India gives the right for the people to remain in the forest, and they want to throw it in the garbage. They want to get rid of it. And people are protesting, and they need support. It's really a huge threat what is happening there. Indonesia, 11 million hectares of, 30 million acres of oil palm plantations. Many people have been evicted there, and they have, so much area has taken over of communities that there came a point that communities just had to take their land back. So this is an area where, plantation company got in financial trouble and they just jumped in. They cut the trees and 800 families set up this camp where I had the privilege to be a few days with them and talking about their struggle and everything. And it's just amazing in a country where also the police, they don't come just to prevent you, they come to shoot you. And still, 800 families, they went there and they're still there. Argentina, also a lot of tree plantations. People have struggled against the companies. There are many experiences there of people reoccupying their land, planting food. And one important thing in the reconnection that I mentioned here was about the experience sharing. Experience from places where everything happened to other places where these things probably will happen. So this is our one friend of Indonesia getting this was in Cameroon, going to the community to share about all these corporate tactics that they have used in Indonesia. Share experience. Here in the middle, a Brazilian woman with her roots in Africa going to Mozambique, which is one of the countries where most of all these millions of acres of tree plantations are planted, and already many plantations are being set up. So this is a plantation area. She is sharing experiences. She's coming from the north of Brazil, a very big area with plantations, Suzano, one company we have there with the genetically engineered eucalyptus trees. And she is sharing her experience, and it has been so, I had the pleasure to be there. It was so powerful. And it was like, it was not only that the community got connected, she got reconnected to where she comes from. And it gave her so much energy to get home and continue the struggle. So I want to end with this very little story back to the area of Dona Maria, Guarani, from the area where I come from. This is another indigenous people living there, Tupiniquim indigenous people. This man, he was evicted from his village. The army arrived, and you need to get out of there, and they just throw down the houses, they destroyed the forest, and he was out of his village. After 40 years of battle, they got their land back, and he said, I'm going to set up my village again. And he's there again with his wife, and he was receiving these two peasant leaders from Mozambique to share their experience, because in Mozambique, at that time, the plantations were arriving. And this is also about reconnecting. This is also about solidarity building. Solidarity is something that, we can say we need solidarity, but real solidarity you will build in a real process, and it comes. And here they are going on the land that was eucalyptus. You can see the eucalyptus on the back. It's still there, but he has his lands back. He has found his roots back, and I think for me this makes it worthwhile. And this was a struggle against the biggest plantation company in the world, and they made it because a bit of all of this what I said to make a movement strong. So thank you very much. This was. The current status of? Well, about Indonesia, yeah.
Can you repeat the question just for people who couldn't hear you?
Okay, yeah. Now I can. Yeah, I can repeat your question. So the question was, what about the forest fires in Indonesia that you had heard about, and the.
He said, at first I thought he meant forest fires, but then he said it's political. He said everything's
No. No, there are forest fires all over the place. I think it's a particular discussion about fire, because since fire is so forbidden everywhere, we have much more forest fires. Right before it was, the communities were always have managed fire, and nature has fire in many places, it needs it. But in Indonesia in particular, the question of, there are forest fires, and the plantation companies, they are promoting it. And they do it to expand the plantations, and they do it in areas that are called peatlands. And there's a big problem, because if you put fire into peatland, you get a lot of, because it's so humid, you get a lot of smoke. So maybe you remember, because I think this year, the Amazon fires, they won the battle in the news from the Indonesia fires, because they're still there. But this smoke has gone over entire regions. It has even crossed borders. And maybe one of you have seen these images of towns completely covered by the smoke. So it's really a big problem, and the neighboring countries, they complain with Indonesia, do something about the fires. And every year, in the Indonesian government, the fires come, and then they say they will do something about it. But actually, they are still, in their forest policy, heavily promoting the plantations. And this president, what he promised in his first mandate, was to secure that at least some of these lands, forest lands, would go to the indigenous people, that also a part of the land would go for land reform. But this has happened very slowly, and increasingly he has become really a very bad president, with bad politics, with more plantation expansion, and it's really going into the wrong direction. So I occasionally was last week with some friends from Indonesia, and they told that, it's actually the plantation companies have taken over, and the situation is extremely bad also in Papua. I would like to mention Papua, because Papua needs a lot of international solidarity. This is this area where Indonesia is ruling, and they are struggling for independence, and they are using the argument that we need to combat this armed resistance that is there, and indeed there is resistance, but they use it to militarize the whole area. And Papua is extremely rich in timber, in forest, in all kinds of minerals, in everything. And the situation now in Papua is really bad. But Indonesia is going bad. There are huge protests. The students are on the street. I don't know if someone saw it. And they are extremely repressive to the many people in jail. All the time I get news that, this friend, he's in jail. He was arrested because he was in the protest. So unfortunately, we don't have good news from Indonesia. Yeah. The other question was about if I know about the Green Belt movement. Yeah, I know, and I know about what's her name again? It's an interesting initiative, because it is about planting native trees. We once made a video against plantation, and we asked her to give a testimony, and she said eucalyptus is not reforestation, and it was important because she's a very well-known person. But still, I think, it would be great if she has passed away, but the movement be a bit more political, because still plantations are expanding. And I think what we also learn is that these two models, they cannot go together. You cannot just do agroecology on your farm and, just don't care about what's happening, because they are coming. I mean, the scale of land grabbing nowadays, and in Africa, especially, all the land belongs to the state, every country, basically. So if the government's not on the side of the people, if they want to give it to corporation, they give it. So we have countries where now, 80% is given out in concessions, and there are all communities inside. So we need to politicize the movement. But it's definitely important initiative. It's the movement, in most places they are planting eucalyptus and call it reforestation, and they said no. Because in Kenya, actually, there has been a time that there was a minister who said we do not plantation in our country because they have a problem with water. And eucalyptus is extremely damaging for water. So like in South Africa, you cannot plant eucalyptus anywhere, but there's always a corporation coming in and convincing the government they can do it. So even in South Africa, they are, expanding plantations where they should not expand it. Some more question? Or?
So here in the United States, we have a lot of well-meaning people who think the Nature Conservancy is doing a wonderful job. I was just wondering what advice you have for us in terms of exposing them as being the largest of these conservatory groups that you mentioned in the United States. And then the second question has to do with the so-called People's Republic of China and what they're doing in terms of deforestation in particularly West Africa.
Yeah. Well, about TNC, I think I once read about that they had got some revenues from oil in some area here in the US, but later on somebody can tell me that story. I think you probably will have a lot of things to expose here. I think TNC is based here, although they are based like everywhere. They actually took over. It was still in the Workers' Party government in Brazil. They took over the Ministry of Environment. Actually, they are very keen in doing lobby to make the policies. What I can advise you is because there's a lot of talk now about nature climate solutions. It seems to be like the big talk in the next climate conference or something. And it's basically like there are very interesting analyses about it that, it's 3/4 of it is about forest and trees. So it's about what I just talked about. So I think the best way to expose them is to go behind what their plans are causing. And so they are talking about these millions and millions of hectares of forest restoration, but at the end of the day will be tree plantations. I think an important thing to show is that they are not an NGO. Maybe do a campaign. You are a business, like TNC is a business. Plantations are not forests, but TNC is business. Something like that. Look at who is on their board. Do you know who is on their board? It seemed to be all corporate actors. Look at how they are functioning. I think very interesting was that it was in Cameroon, where there was this national park where WWF had given arms. They had bought arms, so there was an arm trade by WWF to arm the guards in the national park. And at some point, the guards, they killed the Pygmeo, the indigenous people. And Survival International did a complaint to the OECD, and now these complaint mechanisms, they are quite frustrating, but the interesting thing was that the OECD said, but we cannot accept complaint against NGO. And then Survivor said, but WWF is not an NGO. And said, okay, we will investigate it. And they did an investigation. What is WWF about? And the conclusion was, it's a profit company. It is a profit company. And I guess that if there is somebody of WWF coming in a meeting you will attend, they will not present themselves from the WWF corporation. They will say, no, we are like you, NGOs concerned about the forest, about this and that. So I think we should challenge this kind of things that show that they are partner in business, they are promoting destruction, they have a completely false, discourse. And this natural climate solution, it's all again a distraction of, the basic problem. It's keep the oil in the soil. And they are partnering a lot with the oil companies. And the oil companies are very active in the tree plantation. Like the Eni company, energy company of Italy, is planning to plant 24 million acres of tree plantations in Africa to offset. Shell has huge plans for reforestation with tree plantations, things like that.
And the People's Republic of China?
Yeah, that's a complex debate. Yeah, in Africa, definitely. I mean, the social movements there are so critical about China because they are taken over. They don't care about human rights. In the DRC, for example, which is the country where you can find most of the minerals in Africa, they wanted them. They needed them. So they said, okay, let's give us access to this, and what do you want? Now the state in DRC is not functioning. Since the Mobutu time, it's not functioning at all. But the president, they are a democracy on paper, and so there are elections. So the votes, there are some really remarkable votes in DRC. They even have a cycling tour now, the DRC. The Tour de DRC, like the Tour de France. You have the Tour de DRC because of these Chinese that made the asphalt roads. And then they come in, they have the workers' camp, so they don't even create employment. In Brazil, there was a big battle between the Brazilian government in the Workers' Party time with the China government because they want to set up this big car industry and they want to bring in the workers. And Brazil said, no, it will be Brazilian workers. But now, one of the big job opportunities in Africa is to learn Cantonese. I mean, then you probably get a job because they won't even learn the local language. But I think there is, so this is like how the Chinese are coming in. I think we're giving a lot of problems, giving a lot of forest destruction. There's going, of course, a lot of products from this destruction to China, but still we need to make a question mark, where is it going to? Who are using these products? And then we will probably see that there are many multinational companies there, US companies, European companies. They are based there because it's so cheap to produce there. And they are consuming it. So I have a friend of mine in Brazil, and they have a study group because the Chinese government asked them to study Chinese. They have problems to understand what's happening with them. I find it incredible because they function a bit different from our culture. It's not easy to understand, but they want other people to study them so they better understand what's going on, It's definitely not the Popular Republic promoting socialism or whatever. It is capitalism. It's purely capitalism. It's a sort of imperialism. It is imperialism, right? But still, I mean, the production in China it's the biggest exporter in the world. So we also need to look to that. I mean, yeah.
When you speak in other countries, how do you describe what's happening in the U.S.?
Well, I have the privilege to know some really, wonderful people like Anne and Orin and the struggles they are engaged with, and that's what I know from the U.S. We have a advisor in our advisory committee who is Tom Goldtooth from the Indigenous Environmental Network. And I mean, I talk about the struggles they are doing. I think, for example, when we talk about, when I'm in Acre, once I was with the indigenous people gathering, and I needed to explain to them how this carbon functions to people who don't have carbon in their vocabulary. And I think it's very violent to start to talk about carbon and coming from the outside. So I started to talk about some other things and actually who is moving this and where does this come from. So I was with Tom in several meetings that he was talking about what RED was doing to, the communities here in the US. And I told this story. So that are the type of stories. So I showed some photos about the star sands and about the struggles of the indigenous people and the indigenous people in the streets. And I think the people got it in Acre, the indigenous people in Brazil, and they really, they are really connected to the struggles in California. And because they are so connected, but I think in Brazil in general, we don't really get much of what's going on in the US, We are much more informed about Latin America. We still have little connection with activists here. I think it's a language issue. And what we get from the media, I mean, you can throw it away. It's all, Because of course, they all have correspondents in the US, but what they are talking about is not what we are, what is very useful. But I like to emphasize always that, we are working in the Global South, and that's where we try to facilitate a bit these community struggles and so on. But we do need a global movement, So we need to make these connections. I'm really happy to be there. And I hope many of you can come down once to, to get more connected with each other. And I think if we want to build the people's struggle, that's important to connect the people. And also the people in the USA. Okay? Oh, okay.
Slash and burn has come up a lot in the media lately, on Facebook and other media, with the fires in Brazil and the Amazon that we're hearing a lot about. You portrayed a whole different perspective here with the farmers coming in and reclaiming their land and then planting for sustenance. So, I mean, both issues are sustenance, but I wonder what is really happening? Is it really the farmers going in, just indigenous farmers going in and cutting the forests and planting, or is it more common what you show here, where they are just reclaiming their land?
Now, what I was showing here was a eucalyptus plantation where the farmers came in, and there was forest before. But, I think it was in the UN Assembly that how did our indigenous leader call it yesterday? Sociopath? Sociopath, yeah. So in Washington, D.C., you have your sociopath. We have our, nowadays in Brasilia, and he went there and he said that actually it are actually the farmers who are, destroying the forest, and it's really, really sad and violent because everyone in Brazil knows who is destroying the forest, the Amazon forest. And actually people inside the state, the people who are left, because he cut like 50% in the first month of people who are working to try to control people who are doing deforestation, companies. So there are few people left. But there are some really good people, and they say they started to investigate who was putting the Amazon fires, and said all of this is, almost all, is criminal. And it is this old pattern that we sought, that we had left after us. It's from the past, but it's coming back strongly. And it is this pattern in the Amazon that first the loggers come, you know. We have this agricultural frontier because the Amazon forest, the deep Amazon forest in the Amazon state, it's hard to get there. So you need to get the roads first. That's what the military did in the 1970s. They made the roads because they wanted to integrate the indigenous people, you know, so they could, you know, have a good life, yeah, in our violent urban centers and so on. So they made the roads, and the agricultural frontier was a fact. And they, you know, the loggers came in and they take out the good timber, and then come in the big farmers, you know. And they start to burn in the burning season, and that's what you have seen on television. And after that, they, often by plane, because the area is so huge, they appropriate, they invade, they plant the grass by plane. And they can, you know, they just put the kettle and they make money. And after the soil is really getting poor, then the soy comes in, and the maize and the monoculture and everything. Now, talking about the small farmers, what the military did, they brought in the smaller farmers in these so-called colonization programs, and they were coming from an area which is quite comparable with this area in the south of Brazil. It's cold, it's a temperate climate, it's completely different vegetation. Many of them died from malaria or something, but they just started to deforest to make a land. But they, you know, they were a family farmer. They were not deforesting like 10,000 acres or something. They were just for their livelihood. And slowly now there is a peasant movement going. We had one. She was really, you know, she was really a leader, a very strong leader. An American sister, Dorothy. Have you heard of her? She was working in the Amazon to work with the farmers, to do an agriculture in a different way, agroecological, to learn about the forest. And that is heavily threatening for the big farmers in the area. They don't want that. They want the small farmers to be killed. And Iman Dorothy was one of the people killed, many people killed in the Amazon. It's the most violent area of all the rural areas in Brazil. And so we know what is causing deforestation. I've been talking here a lot about the forest fire because there's some, I mean, there's little time and a lot to talk, but I think it happened like much more than before. It is a long process, you know. It's not happening with Bolsonaro. It's a long process, but the difference now is that he is really promoting this. The violence, he agrees with the violence. So those who are promoting deforestation and violence, they are betting on the impunity, that nothing will happen. So you can just kill the people, you can invade the territories of the indigenous people. He has come up now with a decree that can, if it gets through, it's still not approved, to diminish in 50% the indigenous territories in the Amazon. Because, you know, he says they also have the right to, you know, to have a good life. They also have the right to become rich. And we can share benefits from the minerals. The old story of the old promises, you know, corporate tactics. So it's really a difficult situation, and we are still a bit like amazed about it. Is this really happening? I think many people questioning. But it's also an enormous lesson. I think we need to talk because we talk a lot about the US lately because, you know, you have Trump and we have Bolsonaro. So we are more or less in the same situation. But I think the movements that are really they're really strongly reacting, for example, the indigenous people movement, Afro-Brazilian people's movement are also struggling for their lands. They were already strongly organized during the Workers' Party government because now we look at that time as like they were the good old times, because it's so bad now. But it was not that good at all. They were still making this alliance with capitalism, and to govern, they had this alliance with agribusiness, with the mineral companies. So the indigenous movement, they have been doing their national mobilizations every year, also during the Workers' Party, and they have been repressed during the Workers' Party, and now they continue the struggle. And they also have this, you know, sort of, because people are very upset now, and when you talk with them, they get a bit more calm. They say, yeah, we're doing this 500 years. It's just like a sort of cycles we are going through. But we know that we need to continue the struggle. We need to continue organizing, mobilizing. Those who are more perplexed and don't know what to do are, I think, most those who somehow said, yeah, that's the Workers' Party government is the way to go, you know. This is the way to go to improve some things in the country. But again, you cannot conciliate capitalism with transformation. It's out of the question. So they are really, you know, they really don't know what to do. And it's time to stop and reflect and evaluate. It will take time, but at the same time, we need to mobilize with many people and organize, because he is destroying so many things and so quickly. And to recover this, you know, things that were years and years of struggle and mobilization, I can talk the whole night of what he's been destroying, but it's a hard time. Yeah. Thank you.